Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hi, listeners. Welcome to yet another episode on the State of the Economy podcast. Recently, DCM Shriram Foundation and Sattva Knowledge Institute, a knowledge platform for impact ecosystem, came out with a report titled Transforming Crop Cultivation, Advancing Water Efficiency in Indian Agriculture. The report identified actionable solutions to address the ongoing water crisis, particularly in the agriculture sector. The report said agriculture today accounts for 90% of the water withdrawals in India. Within agriculture sector alone, irrigation uses 84% of the water reserves, followed by domestic and industrial sectors. The report said agriculture today accounts for 90% of the water withdrawals. Within the agriculture sector, irrigation uses 84% of the water reserves, followed by domestic and industrial sectors. It particularly points out at crops such as cotton, sugarcane, and rice. The report recommends the implementation of a water index to enable science-based business and policy decisions. So what's the significance of the report and what are the takeaways? To share these details, we have with us Ratish Balakrishnan, co-founder and managing partner, Sattva Consulting. Welcome to the State of Economy podcast, Mr. Ratish Balakrishnan. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure is entirely mine. Thank you for the invitation.
What is the significance of the report, and what significance does it hold for the country as a whole?
I think the significance of the report essentially depends on two things, right? Which is the significance of the issue that we are addressing and the significance of the solutions that we are proposing. I think as a significance of an issue perspective, there is really no question that groundwater is one of the most critical challenges facing India today. We are home to 17% of the world's population. We have 4% of the water reserves. Close to 73% of India is already under some form of water distress. And in the next 10 years, we are expecting to increase our water utilization by 30%, while there will be a 15% reduction in per capita water availability. So as a focus area, I do believe that groundwater is an extremely significant, important aspect. And I think the very specific focus that we have taken in agriculture, I think is also very critical. Because 90% of our water usage today is in agriculture. 84% of all groundwater reserves is used by agriculture. So what we have done, is to take a very specific focus there, and why I believe this report is important. And two, on the solution side, what we are hoping, Mr. Subramani, is to be able to focus on things that will enable the industry and the civil society's ability to solve the problem together with the government, rather than just propose a few pilots which might solve problems in small scale.
So how did you go about preparing the report, and what is the spark that made you to go for this particular report?
Yeah, this report has been a collaborative effort between the DCM Shriram Foundation and Sattva Consulting. And both of us are organizations that have a deep commitment to impact and sustainability. And when we were looking at areas that are important to solve for, water was a clear choice on what we want to work on. I think the way we approached the report essentially was from three principles. First is we said, listen, we don't have to recreate the wheel in terms of what has already been done. Two is, water is actually a very diverse topic. It's not one of those topics where you talk to one set of people. So capturing the diversity is important. And third is we wanted to make sure that our recommendations, the report is actionable in some sense. So we didn't want to create another report which is only a set of papers. So one of the things that we really did was to look at the existing reports, literature, etc., that is available on this topic for the last 10, 15 years, so that we know what are some of the significant, sort of documentation knowledge that's been created. In addition, we conducted multiple roundtables where we actually got government stakeholders, think tanks, industry participants, actually core industry participants, civil society organizations to come together in a room to actually deliberate on what is actually working. And we took a very crop-specific approach, because when you talk about agriculture very broadly, you always come up with homilies around what should be done. But we specifically prioritized paddy and sugarcane and said, why don't we bring stakeholders that are working in the paddy value chain and the sugarcane value chain to look at solutions? And thirdly, what I hope we've done in the process is also to conduct a consultation after the report was done to actually share our findings and our recommendations to make it more tangible. So that has really been the process that we have followed.
Now, we had a look at the report. Now, the report, says that there are 5 crops which are really, gulp water like anything. I mean, they really are the water guzzlers. So, but these are the crops like rice, for instance. They are all, very critical for India's food security. Sugarcane is another one which I said. I think cotton. So all these are very critical crops, not only in terms of food security, but also for the farmers' remuneration. So, what does the government need to do, and how far can the way suggested?
I think you're making a very important point, because a lot of times the conversation on water and agriculture becomes a process of crop vilification, which is in some sense branding and talking about a few crops as if they are the problem. Think about paddy. We've been growing paddy for 7,000 years in this country. 75% of the districts in India grow paddy. And the dependency on livelihoods on paddy is actually very high. And as you all know, sugarcane contributes to 1.1% of our GDP today, and the exports are expected to increase by 183%. Given 51% of all people in India depend on agriculture, I don't think it's an either-or choice of saying, no, stop these crops, ban these crops. What we really need is an approach of how do we ensure the livelihood outcomes of farmers are protected while ensuring that water conservation happens. And which is why, Mr. Subramani, the focus that we've had in our report is really focusing on how do we promote more on-farm conservation techniques that we can use in agriculture that will enable both livelihood outcomes and water conservation outcomes. Because, as I'm sure you know this already, our water use efficiency in India in agriculture is only 38%. The global benchmark is 60%, which means that even in doing what we are doing, we are far more inefficient in the way we use water than we should be. And the focus for us was to say, while ensuring sustainability of the farmer and the focus on the crops and the products, how do we improve the effectiveness of water utilization in agriculture? And that is really what I think is important in the way all stakeholders have to look at this challenge.
What do you think are your key recommendations, and how do you think that they can be implemented?
Correct. So we have made primarily 3 key recommendations, Mr. Subramani, and I want to talk a few minutes about each of them. I think the first recommendation that we are making is this idea of a recommendation engine, and I'll tell you why we say what we say. Today, there are already existing best practices like, direct seed, work that is happening, AWD, DSR, etc. in the rice side, and drip irrigation on the sugarcane side. When we spoke to stakeholders, what we recognized is that it was not about absence of solutions, but it's about understanding what is the right solution to the right farmer in the right ecology, given the economic conditions. So, for example, if you're in the Indo-Gangetic plain of Uttar Pradesh, where farmers have a certain level of digital literacy, where land sizes are of a certain size, etc., the solution that you have access to is very different from, let's say, in Maharashtra, where the cooperative movement is significant, groundwater levels are much lower, and it's not an Indo-Gangetic plain. And we felt that to be able to identify what to do in the right, local agro ecosystem, as we call it, is going to be very important. And so one suggestion we have is, can we consolidate best practices, recommendations, and on what has worked based in science and practice on the ground, and enable a local agriculture ecosystem-based recommendation engine that can enable both the government, industry, and civil society to make the right recommendation in the right place, right? Because in our conversations with the industry, they always highlighted that sometimes they spend years doing the wrong thing in the wrong place. And being able to make the right practice, I think, will be useful. So this is number one. The second recommendation we have is to build this, what we're calling a water vulnerability index. Today, industry choices, political decisions, lending choices, etc., don't take into account the level of vulnerability a particular location has with respect to water. Yeah. Now, we can talk about the political salience and how we'll make it happen. But what we are recommending is that, is there a way we can make that data available in a manner that industries, governments, civil society can actually use to drive the right decision making? Increasingly, given the focus on ESG going higher and sustainability going higher, companies are looking for reliable data that can help them make the right choices. And we believe that a water vulnerability index can enable stakeholders to make the right choices and also get the right incentives for doing the right thing. That's the second choice. The third suggestion that we are making is really to establish a network of stakeholders that can work on this topic. And what we really believe is that state is a unit to solving a problem. And there are progressive states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, others that are already putting water conservation as part of their state agenda today. How do we build an effective collaborative model between state, industry, and civil society where they're able to work together to solve some of these challenges better? And as a network of state networks, we believe that we can create concerted action. Proof of such work is already being shown in states like Uttar Pradesh. But with a specific focus on water, we believe that such collaborations have to happen. And the last word on this, before I hand it back to you, is one of the things that we don't want to do is to replicate what is already being done. I think many organizations, and we've talked about it in our report as well, are doing some fantastic work on water conservation. We hope that these three things, which is a recommendation engine through local agricultural ecosystems, a water vulnerability index, and the state level network to enable greater collaborative action, actually helps these organizations do better than what they're already doing.
In the water vulnerability index, the index on how vulnerable you are to water, do you think that that is one of the features of your report?
It is definitely one of the recommendations we are making in the report.
Yeah. So, what are you seeing that you think that that can be made a national index of sort?
Yeah, I think the word index may be misleading. So let me clarify. But I do believe that we can actually create a public good that can be available for all stakeholders, that is based on science, that's based on data, that can enable constructive decision making on what.
And finally, what are your suggestions to improve the groundwater level in the country? Like some of the states made rainwater harvesting, mandatory, but again, see, for instance, Tamil Nadu had made it mandatory earlier, but now you don't find that being made mandatory for buildings. So what are the other steps apart from, say, rainwater harvesting?
Sure. I think it is important to break the water problem into two parts. There is one which is water and agriculture. So if you look at water consumption worldwide, there are three buckets, which is municipal water usage, there is industry water usage, and there is agriculture water usage. And I think separating the municipal water usage from the agriculture water usage is very important. In agriculture, our recommendations are really four things. One, how do we drive what we talk about on-farm techniques to be more widely adopted? Including things like drip irrigation, others, etc. And that's where our recommendations are. Second is how do we drive the right crop to be sown at the right place across the country and provide the right incentives for the farmers to change the crops that they're talking about. And again, not vilify the farmer, but create the right incentives for them. The third part of it is how do we look at establishing a lot of off-farm infrastructure that reduce water wastage? Because the wastage of water is actually extremely high in India today. And finally, the point is reducing food waste. Because one of the big learnings we had through this report is that forget everything we do in agriculture, the ratio of food waste is actually much higher, which results directly in wasteful use of water, right? This is on the agriculture side, and that's been the focus of our report. I am not an expert on the municipal side on what we have to do. As you rightly said, rainwater harvesting is one part of it. But secondly, it's just the way we approach urbanization. Cities were not designed to be where they are today. I grew up in Chennai myself, and I've seen how Chennai's changed over the years. And Chennai is going to go much bigger. It's not stopping. We're going to see much bigger Chennai. I think the capacity at the ULBs, the capacity at the state to design for sustainable cities has to grow. And I think that's a more integrated challenge that we have to take into account.
Thank you, Mr. Ratish Balakrishnan. Very insightful views on the whole water. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.